Before we continue, let me recap where I was at this point. Remember that what I've presented here in a few minutes represents months of study and hundreds of pages of material. Revelation was written prior to AD 70. I was convinced of this, so chalk one up for the preterist. Jesus' prophecy and Revelation were most likely written in the same literary style as that of the Old Testament prophets. It's very symbolic, with national judgment being depicted in terms of astronomical phenomena. I could find nothing that indicated to me, let alone the people to whom it was spoken, that this literary style had suddenly changed. Certainly a change of this magnitude would had to have been communicated to the audience, or they would have had a completely wrong understanding of the message. If Revelation was supposed to reveal to the first century church the things that were to come, and at face value appeared to be written in the same style as their prophets had written for centuries, wouldn't John have needed to explain to his readers, and Jesus to his listeners, that their prophecies were to be understood differently? Earlier, I was not ready to concede this point to the preterists. That was just denial on my part. I couldn't refute it. In fact, scriptural precedent was on their side. So, preterist 2, me 0. Third, AD 70. Finally, a point that I didn't have to fully concede. I had to admit that the events of the fall of Jerusalem answered the prophecies of Jesus and John in too much detail to be mere coincidences. The partial fulfillment scenario was not just looking plausible, but likely. The bulk of both Jesus' prophecy and Revelation foretold the destruction of Jerusalem, but they also contained portions that referred to a yet future second coming. Fourth, this partial fulfillment interpretation also explained the imminency passages. I couldn't deny that God had come in or with the clouds in judgment many times in the Old Testament. And just as with apocalyptic language, I couldn't see anything in Scripture that would preclude him from fulfilling similar New Testament prophecies in the same manner. I had arrived at what is known as partial preterism. Just as in all the various views within Christianity, there are different interpretations on the details of the preterist view. Although many labels are used to distinguish the two main camps within preterism, the most prominent are partial and full preterism. Partial preterists believe that most of the Olivet Discourse and the book of Revelation refer to the destruction of Jerusalem, and that Jesus came with the clouds in judgment, similar to the Old Testament passages listed earlier, upon the apostate Jews of that time. Partial preterists still believe in a future physical coming of Christ. This was, as much as I hated to admit it to Bill, where my studies had led me. I was now a partial preterist. Full preterists believe that all eschatological prophecies, including the second coming, were fulfilled in AD 70. Not only did Christ come in judgment, he also came to gather his saints at the resurrection into his kingdom, which is spiritual, not physical, as Futurism teaches. This was both Bill's and Garrett's position. In his conclusion to The Last Days According to Jesus, Sproul states the following.
The great service preterism performs is to focus attention on two major issues. The first is the time frame references of the New Testament regarding eschatological prophecy. The preterist is a sentinel standing guard against frivolous and superficial attempts to downplay or explain away the force of these references. With respect to partial preterism, Kenneth L. Gentry Jr. has done excellent work in forcing reconsideration of the date when the book of Revelation was written. If he is correct in arguing for a date prior to AD 70, then sweeping revisions must be made in our understanding of this book's content and focus.